Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 2 of our weekly Q&A videos. We decided not to do the weird name convention.
Well, and what's
Q&A.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this last time. We touched on it, but I mean, we sort of arbitrarily decided because something interrupted our lives and we took 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
But this really could be the season of the cat.
That's true. Now that we own a cat.
And back in the tradition, I'm just going to do a couple of things about what was happening, not even this week personally, but in this, just today. Finally, remember, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned sumo deadlifts and how they were supposed to be. A friend who was really good, like a high-level competitive power lifter, was saying, yeah, sumo deadlifts are easy. That was a lie. It's easier only if you train it. It's taken me a few months now. I'm up to the same working weight on both sumo deadlifts and conventional deadlifts, which is 345. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm still well off what my peak was. That we actually filmed it even. But I'm hoping that once my right shoulder heals up a bit, I want to try another weighted chin up sort of challenge to see if I can maintain what I had. Never mind set a new PR, because I've had a few physical challenges in the last little bit where I've hurt this and hurt that, and I feel like I'm still trying to catch up. So hopefully that's what I can get done in the next little bit. Mm-hmm. It's never really been a workout channel, but I feel like it's a nice way to sort of mark different stages in my life, mm-hmm. where I am and where I'm going to be declining from.
Yeah.
Anyways, do you want to get into what's been happening this week more now, or maybe after? I think it'll come up in the context.
We'll get into it after, yeah, for sure. So our first question comes from Say 10, and they say also... What?
Phonetically, I saw the name. It says Say 10.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that could be a pun, like for Satan.
Oh, maybe.
But you said it. That's what made me...
Yeah,
anyways, okay.
Maybe. That would make sense.
That makes sense. Okay.
And they say, also, I believe the ultimate tank in the game is Prime Aquaman. All you need to do is hook him up with Masters of Death Cart, Tantu Totem, and any gear to heal self on Special 1. Now when you tag him in, he has 2 specials, maybe more. Use Special 2. Atlantean Hero will come. Tag Aquaman in again. Now he has 3 bars of power. Use Special 1 and use Special 2. Keep repeating it to avoid all the danger. Theoretically, he has infinite resurrection and can absorb any special/supers. This way, you destroy Blackest Night, Catwoman. She's a flop against him. Or sorry, Batman Ninja, not Blackest Night. I saw BN and I made the incorrect assumption, and then I was like, wait, Blackest Night, Catwoman. That's
not a thing.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna agree with this sort of in a qualified way. So I'll agree, but.
It's a good loadout, and it lets you do a lot of damage with not a lot of risk, and if you don't have your power gen nerfed, it does work.
Yeah, I mean, it would be slow, but yeah, I think we've definitely demonstrated this team, not so much team, this guy, where he's bleeding out the opponent by repeating Special 2 and Special 1 and over again. You can get to it different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be just Aquaman on his own and taking both Tantu Totem and Master's Death Card, because you run into trouble if there's power gen dampeners, right?
Yeah.
So we did it with, I think we might have done it with Batgirl and Tantu Totem, just to make sure you don't lose. You don't lose. Like, you get the bar.
Yeah.
You come in with another bar. That's all you need to start off. And so it really comes down to how you define a tank. Is a tank someone who doesn't take any damage? Is a tank just the perfect meat shield? Or, in a practical way, does a tank need to still have some offensive potential? Because if he's a tank only, and your other teammates, if you time it wrong, your other teammates get knocked out, does that mean you just sit there and you just wait, and hopefully the AI gets bored and stops playing, which never happens?
Well, I mean, if your other guys get knocked out with Aquaman here, you can actually, as long as you have the power, continue to swap in and swap out with Atlantean Hero, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. So, to me, this is probably one of the greatest sort of tanks as a character to play with.
Yeah.
Mainly because he has offensive potential, because he does damage over time with his Special 1. You could actually, instead of giving him heal on Special 1, what you might want to do is give him more damage over time.
Yeah. And so I think the one main issue with this is that he is a great tank, but the way that you have to think about what you're spending, right? And what you're spending is a lot of your capacity in your main specialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he is your tank, but also your specialist. And you are not getting the maximum value out of him as a specialist.
Right, because it's slow fights. The specialist, and when we talk about that, I mean, we're assuming everybody is on board with this, that Tantu Totem, Master's Death card on the same character, that has to be your specialist. In the world of Injustice now, that has to be the person who does the most damage and the fastest. Because if you don't, you've got long fights, and it's kind of cool to have a tank, but it doesn't actually help with the overall fight. So it's great for a single character if it was 1-on-3. It is not great for a 3-on-3 fight where you're trying to farm multiplayer.
So it's not a fight that you're going to lose very often, and it can be fun. I think this is where we distinguish between fun teams and grinding teams.
Yeah.
Where I think he is geared up like this. He is probably one of potentially the best tank in the game.
Yeah.
But he is not a good grinding tank.
Right.
So he's fun to play, and it's sort of cool to have a game that you basically can't lose, right? It's almost impossible for you to lose without, very few sort of specific situations, right? And even in those situations, a lot of the time you can still, all you need to do is get to your special 2 again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to lose and would be a lot of fun to play, but it's not great as a way of farming. And so that sort of reduces his efficiency by enough that just because he's a good tank, it doesn't really make up for it.
Right. So on the flip side, so there's different candidates. I mean, because of the way the game has changed and the number of gears that have shown up, there's different things that you can actually do. So you could do it with Arkham Croc, where he builds up his shield every time his teammate does a special. And the beauty of that is that your specialist is allowed to do a bunch of damage. Does a huge amount of damage, and you just have to bring in Arkham Croc later when you need him to take a break. And he could build up potentially a whole other Arkham Croc in order to eat damage.
Yeah.
So he may not be perfect the same way. Actually, and I'm not even sure Aquaman is perfect that way, because a multi-hit special 2 that knocks out your Atlantean hero could actually still damage Aquaman.
That's true, yeah. Any special 2 that can go from one character to another.
Yeah. Now I've got an alternative to float out there. Red Lantern Hal Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
He is actually the ultimate tank. You could create him in a way that he would literally take 0 damage.
Okay.
So he starts off with 3 bars of power.
Yeah.
And that's sort of important to take advantage of Batman Ninja Helmet. So the easiest way to start is, alright, so let's start with Killer Croc Companion Gear. That reduces basic damage by 20% when it's maxed out, reduces special damage by 30%.
Okay.
You've got Batman Ninja Helmet. When it's maxed out, it reduces damage by 2.3% for every 5% of power. So for every 5% power, there's 20 5% units.
Yeah.
So 20 times 2.3 gives you 46% reduction of both. Already, so you've already got 66% reduction in basic damage taken. 76% of special damage.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, and if you're blocking every time, I guess, you could really bring that down. However, New 52 Shazam, I gotta admit, I don't play with the metals a lot, but this was always intriguing to me, where you can reduce the damage taken for Justice League or New 52 teammates by 25% when his passive is maxed out. So all of a sudden now, specials are reduced by 101%. So no, you do not get health back when they do specials, but you just don't take any damage from any specials at all. And basic attacks are reduced by 91%.
So that's like 8% damage.
9.
Or 9% damage. Yeah, I don't... How did I get that wrong? That's such basic math. I'm tired.
So, and you could actually potentially make him completely invulnerable by giving Gold Soda, which reduces basic damage by 30%. Mm-hmm. So you've got more than 100% reduction of any kind of damage.
Yeah.
But the problem is you've taken up 3 gear slots. So what's interesting to me is that what you could do is you could don't give him Ginkgo Soda, because out of all those, out of the 2 gear choices, it's giving him the least amount of benefit, right?
Yeah.
Only basic damage reduction by 30%. Now, Killer Croc Companion is 20% reduction, but it also gives you special reduction. So, you could give him Enchantress gear so that with each special he does, he can build up his power again without being vulnerable, right? With the Batman Ninja helmet.
Oh, that's
giving
true.
Power. Because that's a danger, right? But the problem with that is that he's using up health to do it.
Yeah.
So the other way you could do it is give him Astro Harness. So then he can get 1, 2, 3 free supers.
Oh.
He's taking piddling amount of basic damage. Once it brings him down to the next invulnerability, do another super.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, he can just punch a bit.
Or you could even use your specials to artificially reduce your health to get the free supers.
That's true.
But I think you might use some of your invulnerability period to finishing your special. Because I think you lose the health right at the start, don't you?
Right, that's right. So it would
be hard for timing.
The fastest, I think, is Special 1. Special 2 is hard, but I think part of me thinks that Special 2 might actually even do more damage, potentially, than Special 3 when you take into account the bleed damage.
Yeah, but either way, the important part is that that's a way of taking either 0 basic damage or almost no basic damage.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what you want.
And if you're blocking, you are taking 0 damage.
Yeah.
Like if you're blocking basics, you're taking 0 damage.
But if you have all your gear on, you're taking 0 basic damage anyways.
Well, let's not do Ginkgo Soda. So let's say we give ourselves the chance to do something offensive, like our 3rd slot.
Instead of being kind of crappy,
like,
offensively.
You know what? Give him overpowered super. Make his basics do more damage.
Yeah.
Block the other person. The only time they're actually going to hurt you would be... I wonder if damage over time would hurt you. I wonder if they get any credit for damage over time if the special actually doesn't do damage.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
It might.
It might for the 10% too. We should try doing a mirror match, right? Because mirror match replicates gear, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't. Wait. So we wouldn't be able to test that.
And actually, you know why Aquaman may not be the best tank? Only because if you face a Blackest Night Flash team that reverses damage over time, what you're going to do is give him a bunch of power, and you're going to give him a chance to do some special 2s. And I'd have to think whether any of their special 2s can hit more than one guy. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And that would make the difference, because if it finishes Atlantean Hero, you take some damage. Anytime you hit them with a special 1, they'll take a little bit of damage, but they're going to heal more than they'll take. Yeah. Interesting. It's an interesting thought. And I guess if you were thinking of doing Survivor, having the ultimate tank would be more useful. Mm-hmm. But I think in this case, it's an interesting sort of theoretical exercise. Yeah. Like a thought experiment kind of thing. Yeah. But I don't actually see the value in trying to get the best tank for the sake of getting best tank, unless it's got some sort of that was like New 52 Superman. Remember our Justice League team had this is our sort of latest Justice League team, but our original Justice League team had New 52 Superman. We had him geared out to be totally a tank because his passive let him increase his damage as long as he was getting a bunch of power from Wonder Woman. Yeah. So there's applicability to... Unfortunately, it's not good enough to make him the star of your team to make it worth crippling the rest of your team by making him the specials, I don't think. Yeah. That was a great point, yeah. Yeah, but it would be interesting, especially because both of these tanks are so good and entirely separate. You could make a full, like, they don't need the same gear or anything. Right? You could make a team with 2/3 tanks that are basically unkillable. Yeah. And that would be kind of fun. It would be, again, it's fun. It's not super efficient. It's not super necessary, because the problem is, at the end of the day, you don't actually even need a spectacular tank. In a lot of our good grinding teams, we don't really have a spectacular tank. If we have a tank at all. If we have a tank at all, and you don't need a tank to consistently win fights. So you can win like 99% of your fights without having a tank. Yeah. And so a tank is a good backup, but sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes having a tank instead of whatever else you've got in that slot might even just hold you down. Yeah, the closest we've got on the team that you're watching right now to a tank is Gaslight Batman. I always want to say Gotham City Batman, but Gaslight Batman, who's only because he's wearing Astro Harness.
Yeah.
That's it. 1 out of 9 slots. That's our
Yeah.
tank. That's the total value of tanking on our team.
So there we go. Yep. Our next question comes from Ember Mist. Or I guess comment comes from Ember Mist. And so there's a couple different sections of it. So the first part is for the cat. I vote yes. So that's for hearing more information about the cat. We will give you cat updates as they're relevant. For politics, Martin Luther King said nonviolence is the greatest weapon available to the Negro in the struggle for freedom and justice. That was a quote. Him endorsing rioting is one of the weirdest misquotes I've heard.
That's a comment on what we said last time. All right.
Yep. And then for injustice, Scarecrow's ventilator mask is my most wanted gear, more than Clark Kent's glasses. What was supposed to be the main effect was sadly the worst part. Disabling Heal on Taggin helps against characters with Fourth World and against characters like Containment, Doomsday, and Black Knight Hawkgirl. Best of all, Reflect 40% special damage on block is busted. Reflect in general is underrated, and this one is by far the best Reflect outside of Brandish and Jado. I've only seen Reflect not being underrated in the MK mobile community, oddly enough. And so we have here, we're going to, I guess, talk about it in reverse order.
In reverse order, don't you want to talk about CB first?
Oh, I guess so. We can talk about CB first. Yeah, sure.
So
we'll do CB, then we'll do Injustice, then we'll do the politics.
Yeah, all right. So what was cool was he had his first vet's appointment that we took him to, not at the shelter.
Yeah.
And apparently he's not just well behaved with us, he's well behaved with everybody.
Yeah, he was super chill in the carrier all the way up. We didn't get to go into the vet because it was socially distanced, but he came out totally calm and not stressed out at all either. So his in demeanor and his out demeanor were almost the same. And the second he was home, he was, just walking around. He wasn't like...
And he got a shot.
Yeah, and he got a shot, and he got his nails clipped.
He got his nails clipped after the shot. The vet was telling us, well, because he was just so chill, and that she was checking his nails, they were a little bit long. She just clipped them while he was there after he got the shot.
Yeah, so he got a shot, and he didn't care.
I don't know, kids are there that calm after getting their shot.
Cuddly. Yeah, apparently with the vet. So he just really hung out. And then when he was back, it wasn't like he was chomping at the bit to get out of the carrier anyways. Like, I opened it and he walked out. Right. And he was like, just fine. So he's a really chill dude. He also goes everywhere. Today, I was in the washroom, and he was trying to get into the sink, and we're trying to keep him out of the sink.
What do you mean trying to get in the sink?
Okay, he got into the sink, and we were trying to keep him out of the sink, and he was just looking down the drain hole at the bottom of the sink like he was going to find something in there, and like poking at the bubbles from when somebody had washed their hands previously.
Okay. All right, but you got to tell everybody. So how did we figure out that he was getting onto the bathroom counter after you'd set up all that foil on the counter to try
make it unpleasant,
to discourage him? Yeah,
tons of muddy paw prints up on the counter. Not muddy, but like some residue.
There were paw prints. There were paw prints probably
on the
from
mirror
in the sink. On the yeah, high up,
very high up. Yeah, like shockingly high up. So he's getting into the sink.
Yeah,
he's looking down the drain hole like there's going to be something for him down there.
And if he's behaving now, he's behaving when we're awake.
Yeah.
He's got the run of the house basically when we're asleep.
Yeah, and so what was funny was, I've walked up and I've caught him literally standing on the tinfoil on his way into the sink. But so this time I was using the washroom, so I'm right there in the room with him, and he's trying to climb over me onto the sink. He's trying to like jump up on me while I'm sitting on the toilet. And so I'm like blocking him. I'm like leading him away. I'm like, no, you can't do that. And so then he goes and he jumps from the side and he almost falls off because the tinfoil's sliding back, but he manages to catch his balance and he just jumps straight up there. Yeah. So then I'm trying to pull him off and he just walks until he's just out of my arm span. Yeah. And then just sat down on the sink and stared at me. So he's
a little cheeky.
He's letting everybody know who's boss around the house, but he's still great.
And we figured out something else that he likes, right? So he got away from like wanting to lay on you completely until you figured out that he actually likes to be in a space where he's really sort of surrounded. Yeah. Where he's enclosed.
So make a little blanket tent for him, and then he'll come climb into our blanket tent.
And he'll just, he just relaxes there.
Yeah.
That's,
And if you're in a spot that he's decided that he wants to be, he might come and lay down sort of on or next to you.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, yeah, if he likes a spot, we had a towel out on a window ledge. So there's like a bay window with a window ledge where we put a towel out. And he likes that spot a lot. Yeah. So, doesn't your mom buy like a special bed to figuring he'd be way more comfortable on it.
Yeah, because cat beds are not good for him, as it turns out, because he really likes stretching out. He will get as long as he can whenever he sleeps. Yeah.
And so this bed is there on the towel, and then we find him the next time he's on that ledge, laying on that small bit of towel that's exposed underneath that bed, because he likes the spot, but he doesn't want the
sliver
bed
peeking out from the edge of the bed. Yeah, he does not. He does not care for any of our worldly goods. He just wants the towel. That's really all he wants. Yeah. And it's an ugly, like, bright orange towel, but he likes it.
Yeah.
Better than a nice soft bed.
I didn't realize, I mean, I've never had a pet, or I should say I've never had a pet. The only pet I've ever had was fish. I think I mentioned that before. Lots of fish, really powerful lights so that live plants would grow really well. It was almost like its own ecosystem. But there's something different about fish where you can really only just look at them. Mm-hmm. And a pet that you can really interact with. Yeah,
because they're less liable to get out. And by less liable, I mean they won't get out for very long.
Yeah, they don't survive when they do. Yeah, although like fish, when they jump at the top, I've had a bunch of fish that jump and that you find out later because it's not like you notice all the time and they've just dried out on the ground. Like you can save them if you catch it when it's happening.
Yeah,
and
but too late.
I'd like to pretend it's just their natural inclination to do jumping and not because they were trying to
leave.
They were committing suicide.
Yeah, that would be. Fingers crossed that it was a pretty enriching fish habitat. So you hope.
Yeah. So I guess it's been actually quite the revelation. I've never previously been inclined to want or have any pets, and it's been great. I see. I don't
see the appeal.
I totally see the appeal. Despite all the litter box cleaning and all the all the work that goes with having a cat, it hasn't been a lot. He's been kind of spectacular, and lots of fun. Like I think he's really fit into the family well. Yeah, very surprised. Well, I shouldn't say very surprising. I am very surprised because of my lack of experience.
Yeah.
So
there we go. So now, hopping to the end of the comment, talking about injustice in Scarecrow's ventilator mask.
Okay.
So the effects of Scarecrow's ventilator mask. Let's read it. 40% block special damage back at opponent. On tag-in, healing is negated for 10 seconds. And then the evolve chance, which is on tag-in 100% chance to hide enemy players' character icons.
Right. So this is, we've sort of been responding to Ember Mist in little bits and pieces, and some of it, we'll just put it all together here. So negating healing for 10 seconds is not that great. You have to get the timing right, because it's got to be within those 10 seconds that the opponent is healing anything. And so it's hard enough to make the opponent do a special, right? But it has to be healing special in that first 10 seconds after tagging in.
Yeah.
The kicker is, because of the ambiguity of the language that Injustice uses, healing is not every healing. Healing is not regeneration, which it has no effect on. That would be the Fourth World gear sets. It has no effect on revives. It has no effect on Raven. Just tested in a mirror match, and it has no effect on Containment Doomsday's passive, where he gets his health back.
Yeah.
So yes, the reflect works every time, but it's still a bit of a defensive position, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to take damage. So when you reflect 40% special damage, so how it works is you block, the damage is reduced according to your block. Out of that block damage that you were supposed to take, 40% goes back to them, 60% goes to you.
Yeah.
So you're still taking more damage than they are. It's a reduced amount of damage because the special has to be blocked or it won't trigger.
Yeah.
Now it triggers every time, which is great, but I'm not a big fan of any kind of ability that requires you to take more damage than your opponent.
Yeah. And it was like Black Adam before the buff, right?
Yes.
Where before the buff, it was cool and it was good, and most of the time it was just free, which is what's good about it. And that's the Scarecrow's ventilator mask. The thing that I'll say for it is that when you're blocking the special, it is free damage that you're dealing that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So it's a little bit of damage reduction and a little bit of free damage back.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like it's enough to turn the tide of the fight very often.
Right.
And it also doesn't feel like it... To get full value out of it, right? Ideally, you want to block every single special that's coming in.
Right.
And with the characters that you have out, most of the time... Well, first off, maximum number one of them could have the Scarecrow's Ventilator mask in the first place, right? Only one of them can.
Right.
And if you put Scarecrow's Ventilator mask on them, you are either losing some of their ability to be a special specialist or a basic damage dealer or whatever else they're for, or you're trying to make a tank and you're not boosting their blocking, right? So you're making a tank and maybe you boost their health so that it's less bad for the number of points of damage you're taking. Maybe proportionally you're taking less of your health than the enemy who's hitting you with the special. But the problem is when you have a tank, the tanks aren't going to be in that often, and so you are probably, like, you know, not going to be blocking even most of the specials in a game, right, with your tank.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of situations in which everything lines up to make it change the tide of a game.
So speaking of changing a tide of a game, and on the topic of block specials, what's interesting is not all the reflects are the same. So most reflects, some of the damage, somewhere around 50% goes back to the dealer, 50% goes to the person who's blocking. Charged disc is absolutely brilliant. It totally can change the tide of a game sometimes. I remember facing charged disc when we were playing around with Ares and doing his super duper...
Oh, like the Godsmack.
Godsmack Special 2. And it's supposed to only be 20% chance. It seems like it happens more often. So charged disc's ability, I should have looked this up before we started this, is I think 20% of the time you will reflect special damage. Only charged disc reflects all of it. So if you block, you will reflect all of the damage 20% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So with Ares, if you're blocking, he breaks your block. So you're supposed to take full damage.
Yeah.
So that full damage hits you, except if 20% triggers, you're reflecting all back. There was a bunch of times where I faced charge disc.
It just got obliterated.
I got obliterated down to basically no health.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't tag out immediately, which a lot of times I couldn't because I just tagged in,
he just
have to sneeze on me and I would be knocked out. So I like that it's so powerful, but only part of the time, because then it unbalances fight. So there's a random chance that your strategy is going to get screwed up.
Yeah.
And to me, it feels... Charge disc works better actually as defensive gears, because I think on defense the AI gets better percentages. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure, but it feels like that. Just the way the game flows, and don't really want to rely on a strategy that's only going to be happening 20% of the time. But that is totally unbalancing. Yeah.
And so now we move on to the politics part, and I want to preface this by saying I actually appreciate comments like this, right? Because it's not impolite, right?
Yeah.
It's the phrasing, the sort of like the worst way, the least charitable read of this is that, you know, weirdest misquotes is not particularly aggressive language, right? No. It's obviously, it doesn't need to be. You don't need to sandwich it with unrelated kindnesses and engagement, but from the things around it, it's very clear that this person is saying, you know, not
that he thinks we got it wrong. That he's thinking,
or they think we got it wrong. No,
sorry, that's right. Yeah. That's right. I'm making the assumption because I look at the channel
like 97%
stats.
of our viewership or something.
Yeah, is male, or identifies as male.
So the important part, is that, you know, and there's a specific quote here, right?
Yes. So
this is somebody who has an understanding of Martin Luther King, which is, I think, up until very recently was my understanding of Martin Luther King.
Right, and there's not actually any conflict there. The fact that that Martin Luther King Jr. said nonviolence is the greatest weapon doesn't change the fact that he thought that there was something that was being said by rioting that couldn't be said because these people were not being heard.
Yeah, and I also think that it's possible. I can understand where the maybe misunderstanding, sort of, and misunderstanding exactly what we were trying to say.
Sure.
Could have happened too. So it's a specific quote saying that nonviolence is good, right?
Yeah, no, well, because here's the thing, right? The way you frame it when we're talking about something that's not so intuitively obvious, it can sometimes sound more on our part. It can sound more aggressive than what we're saying, because we're not saying that he endorsed it. And I gotta say, this was one of the few times I went back and watched the video. I almost never do that, and I think probably if we kept tighter scripts and it was less conversational, I wouldn't have had to. But for the number of times I actually go back, which is almost 0 now, I can say it's 1. It wouldn't be worth the extra effort. But so the quote was, and I think you said this, he talked about how rioting was sometimes necessary.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that he said it was good. It's not to say that he endorsed it, because he didn't. But he clearly understood why it was happening.
Yeah. And he wasn't disavowing rioting either.
Right.
He wasn't coming out against the rioting. So a lot of people, and we're going to talk a lot more about this, I know you have some quotes and stuff, but a lot of people use his words as a way of saying he wouldn't have supported the rioting. And, this is not, like Martin Luther King Jr.'s way. The people that we look up to for human rights, right, did not behave this way.
Right.
And I think when you make that argument as a way of condemning the protesters, we're not saying that he endorsed rioting, but we're also saying that he very specifically understood the place of it.
Right.
And he would not have been...
He clearly did not. Like, these are why the quotes matters. He did not condemn the people who were rioting.
Yeah.
So the quote that we were sort of paraphrasing, let's get the quote exactly right. It's from something that he wrote called The Other America in 1967. Just before he was killed.
Yeah.
So let me say, as I've always said, and I will continue to say...
I will always continue to say.
I will always continue to say that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so, in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again.
Yeah. So he was saying sort of a version of what our stance has been on the channel, right? Not to say that, like we independently came to like the same conclusion that he did.
I think we're clearly influenced by the flow of history and what other minds, especially great minds, have said before us, right? Like, it's not like exactly.
But he said in a very eloquent and concise and a really emotionally resonant way, this is what you get. Right? This is what happens, and it's a symptom.
Right. And
it is a way of speaking in a voice loud enough for more people to hear than normally do.
Right. There's even in an article from The Atlantic, there's something else that maybe and I don't want to spend this whole video like just reading Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, but I think it really makes the point along that line. So the policymakers of the white society have caused the darkness. They created discrimination. They created slums. They perpetuate unemployment, ignorance, and poverty. It is incontestable and deplorable that Negroes have committed crimes, but they are derivative crimes. They are born of the greater crimes of the white society. When we ask Negroes to abide by the law, let us also declare that the white man does not abide by law in the ghettos. Day in and day out, he violates welfare laws to deprive the poor of their meager allotments. He flagrantly violates building codes and regulations. His police make a mockery of law. He violates laws on equal employment and education and the provisions for civic services. The slums are the handiwork of a vicious system of the white society. Negroes live in them, but do not make them any more than a prisoner makes a prison. Let us say it boldly that if the total slum violations of law by the white man over the years were calculated and were compared with the law-breaking of a few days of riots, the hardened criminal would be the white man.
Yeah. So here you can see he's very clearly not coming out and saying, you know, oh, well, I'm fine with all these people who are committing crimes. He's saying it's terrible that these people are committing crimes, but you have to be willing to be fair and balanced. If you're only talking about one type of crime, if you're only talking about one group of people who's doing any wrongdoings, then you're not having a full discussion.
Right. I mean, that the phrase that really got me was it's a derivative crime, right?
Yeah.
That rioting and the violence, they're derivative crimes. It really puts into context in a really short phrase how he felt about what was happening.
Yeah.
And I don't think I want to read a whole bunch of it, but I'm going to link in our description to 2 articles for people who are interested and want to read a little bit more. There's a couple articles, and it's based on the title, it should be pretty clear what the position of the writers are. One is called King's Message of Nonviolence Has Been Distorted.
Yeah.
And the other one is called By the End of His Life, Martin Luther King Realized the Validity of Violence.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think really sort of makes that point.
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting points that came out was that taking the message of nonviolence out of context, saying nonviolence, that was just it. It was an interesting one because part of it was that for nonviolence to really work, there had to be love. There had to be love both ways. There had to be love by the protesters for their oppressors, and there had to be love by the oppressors on the protesters, because if you give your body up to violence, you allow yourself to be beat up, to be, as a protester, be beat up and violated. What has to happen is you can't just keep on letting that happen. Somebody on the other side has to care enough about you to be offended and moved by that to change the system that has been oppressing you.
Yeah.
And if all you've got is nonviolence and no love, it's failing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. And I thought that was like a really interesting point. So like I said, links in the description for anybody who's interested. They're, again, maybe they're not the most mainstream positions, but I think it's pretty clear from Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches towards the end of his life. He understood the reason why there was violence, and he didn't condemn it.
Yeah.
Oh, and
I guess I would say he might have condemned individuals for individual crimes. Right. He wasn't saying that any one person, if you did something within a riot that was unacceptable, he didn't let anybody off the hook for what they did. He wasn't saying that their actions were
they were they were responsible.
Yeah, all of a sudden fine because of it. But what he talked about was the inevitability and the reason and the use. So rioting as a whole was, he came around to discuss it as a thing that would continue to happen and would necessarily happen until changes were made, while still not, supporting any acts within the rioting that he didn't support. It wasn't, he held both views simultaneously, both that nonviolence was the answer and that violence was wrong, while also still understanding what the riots were and why they needed to happen.
And I don't know if it'll change anybody else's mind or have an impact on how they feel about Martin Luther King, but it part of my discovery and understanding of how he felt about things and how he wasn't just this, guy who just laid down and let everybody
like a Mr. Rogers type figure where it was just unambiguous, peace. Yeah,
exactly. He kept guns. He kept guns for protecting his home.
Yeah.
And do with that what you will, but that was part of my path to maybe having a more nuanced understanding of what he was saying.
Yeah, there's a difference in encouraging political movements to do something and actions of the individual.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we've got another comment here, and it's going to be along the same sort of track. Not about Martin Luther King Jr., but so this one is from James Liang, and they say, it is also about the type of people Black Lives Matter has defended. A man who tried to rape a woman and someone who pulled a gun on a cop and got shot because of it. Even worse is the politicians that continued to encourage the riots while forcing businesses to close down permanently. In regards to your comment at 20 minutes, I'd refer you to this video. And then there's a link to the video. Do you want to explain the comments at 20 minutes and the video link?
So after not doing it at all, this is the second time I've had to go back to our videos to take a look. So 20 minutes is the part where I'm talking about the irony of the caravans that were dangerous and were threatening to the American people were caravans going into Portland.
Yeah.
And the link to the video was some footage where it sounded like protesters, or at least the interpretation in the description in the comments was that the protesters were saying there's Trumpers and they're going after them. But if you go there in the comments, there's a link to cleaner footage where you hear the same thing, and it's actually more obvious. They're saying there's a couple.
Yeah.
So again, not that that excuses anything, but that kind of picking little bits of, I guess there's that contrast, right? Individuals versus a movement. Looking at individuals, I'm sure there's going to be bad actors in any large group. If the group is large enough, there's going to be some a-holes in it.
Yeah.
The question is whether the movement itself is valid, and whether you can let the smaller number define how bad it is, as opposed to the other movement where I think there's a much larger number who are complicit in the evil being done.
And I think there's something to be said for, there's even a possibility that there's enough terribleness associated with a group that you can't support the group as a whole,
right?
But still support what they're ostensibly trying to do.
Yeah, what
right?
the principles that they're supporting,
which is part of what we're talking about with the police, right? When you say defund the police, what we're saying is that the institution of the police, there's too much corruption and racism and a lot of other things built into it. You're still saying that many of the things that the police are ultimately trying to do, there's a lot of things that the police say they do on the tin that we want to keep happening, right? And it just can't be.
Did we say on the tin? Is that an expression? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it does write what it says on the tin.
Oh,
theoretically.
Cool. Okay.
Right? So
all right, so that's another way of saying ostensible. Okay.
Yeah, so cool. some of the stuff that they're saying they're doing, we're like, I want people to investigate murderers. I still like, there's still, people that you want to find and prevent their damage. From society.
Because you've had decades of what they call the war on crime. So they've increased funding. And meanwhile, the crime rate has dropped. And they've taken credit for that, which is not really true. If you read Freakonomics, they make an interesting case that the availability of abortions has been responsible for the decrease in the crime rate. Mm-hmm. And I've also read an interesting theory that the removal of leaded gasoline has also contributed to the decrease in crime rate too. But what you've got now is this huge apparatus that is expensive, that no longer needs to be this big, and there's no way of pulling back. And so what they've done is they've ended up taking over all these other jobs and doing these things that they're not trained to do, and they do very poorly. Mm-hmm. To that point, it was either today or yesterday, there was body cam footage released, because there's some sort of, I guess in Utah, there's some sort of legislation that means that it becomes publicly available within 10 days if there's some sort of shooting. Police officers were called by somebody's mom because 13-year-old autistic was needing mental health support. So they came, they chased him down, they yelled at him to get down on the ground. 11 to 12 shots were fired.
Oh my God.
He's on the ground.
Yeah.
He says, I don't feel so good.
Yeah.
Tell my mom I love her. He's not dead, but he is in the hospital, lots of broken bones, maybe paralyzed, a good chance of permanent damage and permanent injury. Yeah. That's the context that we're talking about. And I think it misses the point a little bit if what's the wording of the question? It was
it's about the type of people Black Lives Matter has defended. Right. A man who tried to rape a woman and someone who pulled a gun on a cop that got shot because of it.
The point, I think it misses the point a little bit if you start by using that kind of language, say that Black Lives Matter is defending these people. So let's assume the man is trying to rape a woman is the case of Jacob Blake, right?
Yeah, because that's probably right. That's the sort of most public one that we'd imagine, right. And we can only work based off of the information we have, and it seems like that's the most likely thing.
So I'm going to read a quote from a newspaper article. Prosecutors in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, charged Blake, 29, with third-degree sexual assault, trespassing, and disorderly conduct in connection with domestic abuse last month, according to the Kenosha News. An arrest warrant for Blake was issued on July 6th. The newspaper reported that a woman living in the 2800 block of 40th Street told police in May that Blake, her ex-boyfriend, had come into her home and taken her car keys and vehicle. She also said he had touched her sexually without consent.
Yeah.
So let's start off by saying, to me, one of the big problems with police brutality apologists is that it doesn't take much to justify what happens, right? So you follow a guy to his car, you grab him by the back of his shirt, you stay really close to him, and you shoot him 7 times in the back, and the justification is, you're scared for your life, and how much of that is, how it just boggles my mind how you can say, I am so scared for my life, but you're the one that created a situation where you've got a short-range weapon. You don't need to be holding on to somebody's shirt. You don't need to be following that closely. And you don't need to put 7 bullets into him at short range. Yeah. If you're really that scared of him, you do something before you get to the point where he's reached his car in front of his 3 sons and you're afraid there's something in his seat. I thought police were trained to subdue people.
Yeah. And de-escalate.
Right. Well, all right. So maybe not that they do that, but they should be doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so, let's be clear here. We can try to litigate the victim of this shooting, right? We can try to go into it. We can look at how credible the accusation is, right? How credible the charge is.
Yeah.
Right? And if the charge is there, I'm not going to mince words about it. Sexually assaulting somebody is terrible.
Absolutely.
Right? And there should be a punishment associated with that. There should be some steps taken. There should be, whether, or not even punishment, because there's different models, right? If you're looking for restorative justice, if you're looking for potential rehabilitation, if you, depending on...
justice. Justice is a better word, I
Something
think.
needs to happen there. There's no way that there should be no intervention there.
Right.
No matter what shape you think that intervention should take.
It should be proportional. That's an important word, proportional.
It's not getting shot 7 times in the back. So,
and we can't ignore the fact, right? He was accused of those crimes. He wasn't convicted. He was accused. Even if he were convicted, should he be shot? Should he be executed on the street before he's had his trial?
Yeah.
When he's just been accused.
Yeah, which is absolutely not. That's very clear. So,
technically he didn't die. He was paralyzed, but to me it's really disingenuous to try to dig up dirt on people after they've been brutalized by the police.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to assume that the police knew who he was. We'd have to assume that they knew there was a warrant for his arrest when they grabbed him by the back of the shirt. And that's as much because he's got a warrant. He's not convicted. He's not been... I guess what's the word for what the punishment is when, they decide what he gets?
Isn't that convicted?
Convicted is when they say you're guilty. And
sentenced?
Sentenced, right. He hasn't been sentenced. And the sentence that you don't get to sort of dish out on the streets is being paralyzed for the rest of your life. Yeah. Or, at that point, if you're shooting him 7 times, a lot of times, basically, the cop is thinking he's going to die, right? Yeah. It's not that complicated.
And so, obviously, we don't speak on behalf of Black Lives Matter, right?
Right.
And I can't tell you that there aren't members of Black Lives Matter who are defending him as a person, because there might be. I can't tell you if there are some people saying, it's fine if he sexually assaulted that person. There might be people who are saying things that I don't agree with, right? And there might be some of those people who are in one way or another affiliated with Black Lives Matter. But the story that I've been getting, right, is not that nobody's talking about him specifically, because it's not about him specifically. It's about what happened to him, right? And whether or not it is, even if it wasn't a race thing, right? Which, we can see from statistics that race is a factor in these situations.
Even the fact that there's a lot of bad cops and that there's racism, that intersects. They're not mutually exclusive. Yeah. You can be bad cops and be bad. You don't have to be bad only to black people for there to be racism.
Yeah. So even if race wasn't a factor here, which it was, even if he had done something much worse, right? Even if he did what he's being accused of by the police here.
Yes.
None of those things justify what happened. And even if he was a terrible person, none of that justifies what the police did. Right? You can say that one individual did some shitty things and something needed to happen there.
Right.
And also say that what the police did was attempted murder in the streets.
Yes.
And a totally unnecessary show of violence.
Right.
And those things can be completely divorced.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an added irony here. So, it should be non-controversial that police have a poor reputation when it comes to handling cases of rape and sexual assault, right? I mean, I think if you talk to it, this is to generalize. If there's a woman in your life and you talk to them about whether they have confidence that they will be taken seriously when they report either rape or sexual assault, I think there's going to be a large proportion of women that will say no.
Mostly no, I think.
Right. And so to be using that as the pretext for justifying that kind of violence against Jacob Blake, there's an irony there, right? So they're not that great at helping the victims. And somehow in this one particular case where there's an accused perpetrator of that kind of violence, they have to kill, or they have to try to kill him.
Yeah.
I don't think that's stating too much. You put 7 bullets in somebody's back, you're not trying to just subdue them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're out of footage. I've probably got some more game footage that I can put up. Originally, we were planning on not finishing right now. But can I mention something about Taylor Swift that I think is kind of cool?
It's a weird tone shift, but yeah, you can.
Okay, so, because the problem always is, to me, that when you want to make a point about something bad that's happening.
Yeah.
So, if you've got... If there's the kind of crime that people are willing to accept, if there's a kind of crime that's almost socially acceptable, let me give you an example. Like sex workers. Police handle crimes against sex workers very poorly, right?
Yeah.
And it's because socially, I think, it's harder to find support for standing up for sex workers, even though the principle is kind of weird because, listen, if you're a convenience store and you sell candy bars there, is that a reason why people should be allowed to steal it from you? No.
Yeah.
But when we talk about sex workers, because in society they're so devalued that assault against sex workers, people treat it like it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very few perfect victims. Taylor Swift was a perfect victim. And part of it is the shift in society. So there was a case not too long ago where there's a DJ at some sort of promotional event. Taylor Swift's mentioned to the radio station's boss that this guy had been inappropriate with her. I have no idea what she actually said. He got fired.
Mm-hmm.
He sued her for, let me look, $3 million, saying that she falsely accused him of groping her at a public event, and that was the reason why he lost his job.
Mm-hmm.
So very rarely are there perfect victims. In this case, this is probably as close as it comes to, right? Because I've seen these lawsuits come up.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of them like this where somebody who's really rich is accused of doing something bad, and because they've got a lot of money, they're willing to settle instead of taking trial, not because they're wrong, but because lawyers are expensive, and it's cheaper to think about what it would cost you to pay the lawyer to defend you, and pay that off, instead of going through with the trial, the hassle, the time. It's still going to cost you the same amount, and there's maybe a tiny chance of losing the lawsuit if you get a really weird jury, or your lawyer screws up, or their lawyer is really good, or whatever, right? Because sometimes it's just random.
Yeah.
And
because that's how the legal system works.
That's it. So what it amounts to, it's almost like a shakedown, right? So you sue someone, you get some settlement money, or but the thing is, if it doesn't work, so if you sue someone but you don't get your settlement money, then you can drop the charges, right?
Yeah.
So what was cool about this, and I gotta say I'm a little bit biased. I liked early Taylor Swift. I hadn't listened to her recently, but I listened to her a lot more after this because I thought, man, that is cool. That is badass. So instead, like a total boss, she countersued him for $1.
Mm-hmm.
You think, well, what's $1? And some people say, well, it's for the principal to show that he can't get away with something like that. When I read some of the legal analysis around it as it was happening, somebody explained that the countersuit meant he couldn't just drop it and walk away, like some people do if the suit doesn't work and they don't want to settle. And it cost her money,
Yeah, because I guess saying you're not going to back down most of the time is more like calling their bluff, right? And you're expecting them to drop it.
Right. But this is better than dropping it. Because then you have to go through the trial, and then you get to expose what he did. So she totally ripped him a new one. They went to trial, they went through the evidence, and it couldn't have been easy, right?
Yeah.
Because of the time that it costs. I mean, that's probably one of the few things that has value to everybody, right? That if you're rich or you're poor, your time has value. Although one of the benefits of being rich is that you can offload some of the grunt work so that somebody else has to waste their time doing stuff
and you can also, the more money you have, the more you can trade your time. Because your time has more value, probably, unfortunately. Like, economically more value. Not saying more value like you're a more important person, right? Because that's not something I believe. But your time has economically more value. But if your time is valuable enough, you get to take a lot more of time just for yourself because you have the money to live and live well either way.
So there were pictures of the event. She was a credible witness. There was nothing in her past that people could bring up and say, yeah, she's just money grubbing, right? Because she only countersued him for $1.
Yeah.
So it was, I don't know, it was just really cool. There's not a lot of perfect victims. This was one of the cases where there was. And the beauty of it was that she was willing to take the time and spend the money to stand up for herself and other kinds of cases of assault where, because of the pain of reliving some of that, people don't sort of follow it through to the end. Again, not their fault. It's not their responsibility to change society, but this is the kind of stuff that actually changes society, I think.
Yeah. So there we go. That's jumped around a bit, but that's definitely a much lighter note to end on. We've had another episode that's been largely political here. They just happen to us because we say political stuff and then people respond, and then we want to respond back. And
well,
I mean, I guess we're allowed to talk about whatever we want in these videos. We don't need to apologize for it. But anyways, that brings us well past our video time and to the end of the episode. We've got some things we'd like to tell you to people. So first off, a shout out to Eliza Crystal Meditation Caton. She sat in a special chair and purchased enlightenment. This shout out has been brought to you by a discount to an overpriced gym. I think it was not like a Groupon or something. I don't know, some opening special.
For a gym?
For a very expensive gym. I think they had some like crystal meditation chair. I don't know.
I gotta say, thank goodness I have a gym in the basement, because otherwise I don't think I'd be working at it. I would not have wanted to be going to gym in the last 6 months.
That's fair. Yeah. And we'd also like to give a huge thank you to everybody who has been supporting us on Patreon. So that is Consul Peasant and Edwoon, who are supporting us at the highest tier, Last Word. Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., and Irvin Ruiz, who are supporting us on the credited level, and Chris Wolf and Scarlett Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, and Gavin Malott at the gratitude level. Thank you all so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time. Komoda.